Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for stopping by for today's roundtable session. My name is John Cano, the Associate Director of University Community Links, UC Links, and today we have as our main guest Professor Diana Arya from UCSB, who has been working for many years in critical reading assessment.
My name is Diana. A lot of my friends call me D. My students call me Dr. D. Um, Deanna. I'm also I have a multicultural background, so I'm a proud daughter of an immigrant parent, and who worked really hard to get to this country and had made a life for my family. I mean, I'm just ever grateful for the work, and in some ways, the work that I'll be presenting today is really a tribute to the many young co-learners. That's who we describe young students at our partnering elementary and secondary schools. We see them as co-learners in that we learn from each other, regardless of our ages and our experiences. I always learn something new. And I took that spirit in the work that I did. I am associate professor in education at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And my area of study is in generally literacy and language development. And I'm interested in the ways in which we can foster such development that in a way that acknowledges all the funds of knowledge that our young co-learners bring to every space that they're in. And I ground it in that firm belief. So I don't question that part of my work. And so far, it's paid off hugely because I learn every time from my young co-learners. So that gives you a little sense of who I am. I'm also a faculty director of a center that we have in our school at UC Santa Barbara. And we have young co-learners coming to us from the surrounding area to receive all sorts of support. So I think it'll be very important for those of you who are right there on the policy front, those are, involving having to deal with standards. And I bring a spirit and experience. And no, I've had to go toe to toe with some folks here in the Santa Barbara area who listened to a six-part podcast series that was created by a journalist on the reading wars and what needs to be fixed. Emily Hansford is her name, and I congratulate her on a successful, probably lucrative endeavor. Um, and community members have taken up that content and have decided what counts as the science of reading. I've heard it used as a verb, a noun, a place. Is that where science of reading is? I mean, they use that term generally, which I don't mean to I know how language develops. So one overgeneralizes when they first hear a word. You hear a child call everything a dog, anything with fur and 4 feet is a dog. And I see the same thing with using a catchy phrase, maybe something. Yeah, yes, I agree, Sarah. And I bring that spirit with me because I think now's the time to just, you know, to share a fuller picture. And I want to help everyone who's been in the trenches and had to deal with those kinds of conversations. And so I have that in the back of my mind. So I'm going to dive right into. I have a few slides that I'm going to share, and then Depending on our conversation, if there's space, I would like to engage in a little practice with a couple of my folks. Summer, would you be willing to be a student or a young co-learner so we could try out the CRA and practice, and then I can do some meta commentary around it so that you can understand what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, why I've chosen certain things. Does that sound fair for everyone? Okay, let me share my slides and we'll get on the way. Um, so this is a sneak peek um, of the assessment, the book that is going to be published hopefully within the next month. I love art and I did all of the illustrations. It has a maritime feel because we're in Santa Barbara. And I actually grew up on the Gulf Coast of Florida. So I, it's me. This kind of design is me. But I want to acknowledge those who have worked really hard on this assessment. And while Summer wasn't a part of the final book product, she was a part of the study that I believe was linked in the agenda. And so she's very knowledgeable. Those who have been working over the past several years directly on the assessment, clarifying all the texts, all the questions that we use. Here are the four. Sabiha, who you talked with, who spoke earlier. Then we have John Galiski, who is also a PhD student in education. He has a background in science education, and so he brings a scientific kind of mind to the content. So we create informational texts. A good portion of them are scientific in nature. And then Daniel Katz, who was a PhD student in education at UC Santa Barbara, currently works for the Northwest Measurement Evaluation Center that's stationed in Portland. So those are the four. And what you will see when I will make an electronic copy of this. It's going to be more than 400 pages, this manual. You'll see what you won't have until this book is made available are the first three chapters. And, along with preliminary pieces. But the intro, the research and development, and the overview is a more of a very detailed, descriptive, step-by-step overview of the CRA. And also all of the validity work that went into constructing this assessment, which took close to 5 years to make. And honestly, that in my previous experience, that's how long it takes to develop a reading assessment, that it has a measurable aspect to it. Not all assessments are measures, and I could get into the weeds of that. That's more actually aligned with my partner's work, who is also a professor here. He deals with, he's a philosopher of measurement, and, a lot of times uh, assessment, test, and measures, all those words get conflated. But there are some distinctions, and I could share more if that's an interest. But once the book is available, I will let John know, and he will have an unpublished link available for you so that you can have this knowledge, which chapter 2 in particular might be helpful for offering any evidence for the validity of this instrument. So that might be helpful for some folks. Okay, this is what I added to my slides. And it might be a good anchor for engaging in conversations about science of reading and reading comprehension. So, and the reason why I picked this particular model, this is an old model. It was developed in the early 80s from two reading psychologists named Goff and Tunmer. And I talk about this in the book. But their whole point of about this model, which they called the simple view of reading, unfortunately was not clarified in the 6-part series podcast that I mentioned earlier that super went viral, created by Emily Hanford. The flavor there was, see, reading is simple. We just need to teach kids phonics, and then they'll be good readers. That was actually not the point of these early psychologists. They were trying to make the point that reading involves more than decoding, which is literally reading aloud words. When you're reading aloud words, you're decoding. And this, but it doesn't mean that you actually understand those words. It's your ability to show that you have some automaticity when you see a word that's spelled, let's say, SAW, you know immediately that that word is saw. I may not know what meaning that word brings, and for that particular word, saw, it could be something you use in construction, or it could be something, it could be a verb relating to something that you saw, right? That you observed with your eyes. And so decoding is about the sound print connections. It's not about meaning making. The meaning making, these psychologists explained, is involving the language comprehension. The interaction of those two is what leads to reading comprehension. And so digging down further, this is why they say it's like that Einsteinian, spirit. I will be as simple as possible, but I will not go any simpler. He's famous for saying those kinds of things in his own formulas on relativity. Similarly, these reading psychologists, this is as simple as we can get, and know that it's more than just decoding. When you break down decoding even further into particular skills, you see how complex it is. So having the simple view of reading as an anchor for discussion might be helpful for those who inhaled the podcast and saw, and decided that, science of reading meant something. The simple view of reading is only decoding. There are many skills and abilities that go into decoding and language comprehension. I actually don't think anyone needed to learn this in this space where I'm sharing this, but I thought it might be helpful for anyone who would be skeptical of why take the time to do one-on-one formative reading assessment, because this assessment is designed for someone to understand how a young co-learner may be recognizing and manipulating sounds, their ability to engage in phonological awareness, how they're able to map sounds onto print, their sight words, because you cannot sound out the word like H-A-V-E. That would be havey, right? Or havey. But we know that the E is silent. And so you need some spelling information. And a lot of times that involves understanding on site what a word, how a word is sounds in the English language. Then you have language comprehension, which could be broken down into vocabulary knowledge and receptive language and oral analysis. It's actually, this model could be broken down even further. So the reading psychologists, Goff and Tumner, they presented this model not because they thought that reading was easy, but they wanted to explain that reading involves more than just a single kind of knowledge or skill or ability. So that might be helpful for those of you engaging in different stakeholder conversations. So the supplementary materials that John shared, and I think on the bottom of my heart, I thank UC Link's leadership, Mara and John, for providing a way where I could share these supplementary materials because I'm working with the series editor. We were trying to figure out how to make that happen. So I'm super glad for that. But in the supplementary materials, there are 5 different kinds of files available. You have the guides, the templates. There is a demonstration video that I provide so you can see me working with a young co-learner on a critical reading assessment. The word check-in task, which is what we do first and foremost, and I'll explain the importance of that. But essentially, that's reading aloud words that are listed in the order of complexity. So, starting with words that are typically expected for kindergarten first graders, those who are reading at that level, and then moving up through middle school. Then we have 2 series of texts across the grades, and we limited our assessment starting from preschool, pre-K through middle school. And the reason why we did that is because this is hard work, but we mostly work with elementary and middle school students. So we don't really work with high school students. But you have 2 texts for each grade level, one from Series A and one from Series B. And then there are embedded videos in each of these texts, and I'll explain more why that's important. But the one thing I would say to all of you, when you download this folder, make sure everything stays in the same folder so that the embedded videos in the text will work properly. Otherwise, if you pull everything out, it breaks the link.
And there's one comment in the chat, Diana. It's from Sarah, and she said, "You've piqued my interest even further when you mentioned the expanded version of the simple view of reading as rationale for administration one-to-one of the CRA."
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad that, yes. In fact, yes. Thank
Just
you.
because I'm just thinking in the elementary, well, the CRLP supports LEA's K-12. And it is sometimes a huge partnering opportunity to build rationale and context for administering the classroom teacher themselves, the deliverer, the most trained person for instruction. You will we strongly recommend that you deliver these assessments because, oh, so we can't have a roving sub. Oh, we can't just have the, so you got me listening, even more so.
Excited. Oh, I'm so glad. So the other aspect I think it would be important for folks to know about the CRA is that it's multimodal. That's the era we're living in. So and before everything got defunded, there was, I don't even know if NAEP exists anymore, the National Education uh, Assessment of Progress or something like that. I forget what the actual acronym stands for, NAEP. They have a reading framework that I think it's the 2026 reading framework. So the new national reading tests are multimodal. And they're still trying to figure out how to do that. Although maybe with the current administration, they got a break. They found it rather challenging. It is challenging because in the 21st century, Not only are young co-learners expected to engage in printed texts, but they need to make sense of different kinds of texts across different modalities. We've got, data graphics that are important to interpret because we've amassed all of this information. And so we are living in an information age that is just moving at the speed of light or probably faster. And so there's just so much information to unpack. And so data graphics are going to be increasingly part of especially news articles. If you subscribe to the New York Times, you can see how complex it can be. And then also we embedded videos. So the idea is that, this particular text, which is a middle school level text. So what you're seeing is designed for the middle school level reader. It could be a sixth grader, reading at a middle school level. It could be a fourth grader, or it could be an eighth grader. I mean, it's about the actual level, which my work early on was involving linguistic complexity, linguistic and syntactic complexity. And so knowing that there are words that, a young co-learner might know more than older co-learners, right? As we grow, we're constantly learning, and we are all language learners because language continues to evolve and we continue to encounter texts. And my advisor, P. David Pearson from Berkeley, is famous for saying there's a text for every single one of us that'll bring us to our knees. And I keep that in mind when I think about engaging young co-learners in reading. And so I would never share a text like this with someone who is reading at a first grade level. This would be beyond them, right? And if I were to offer them a text at what I think their level should be, what I miss is what kind of sense can they make when the text is at a linguistic level that's made for them? Because I want to see the sense-making abilities. That's why we have text at every grade level, so that this experience is not frustrating. We want it to be enjoyable. And the goal is that there's complementary information in the graphic, in the video, in the printed text, and students are asked questions that would require them to triangulate those sources of information into bigger ideas, key ideas about the textual information. The topics that we included were based on what we found to be engaging and interesting to our young co-learners. Our young co-learners were not just, quote, subjects who involved themselves in pilot studies. We wanted to know what they thought about the text. Did they like it? Did they find it interesting? If they didn't find it interesting, what advice do they have for us? We really want this experience to be beneficial to their lives and meaningful, because that's why we read. We don't read to take tests. The tests have been constructed to understand how we read, but testing as a purpose for reading is not authentic. And we want these reading experiences to be authentic as possible, as authentic as possible. And so because of that, at any grade level text, one could demonstrate an emerging ability within that grade level. Maybe they're able to decode, maybe needing to sound out some words. Maybe they have a few more miscues, which are alternative readings, and they may be able to, respond to maybe one of several questions that we ask them. A developing reader within that grade level might, show more ability to decode and comprehending key ideas. And then those who are reading at an independent level are showing full automaticity with few miscues, and they're able to respond fully and accurately to all comprehension questions. This is for the comprehension question part, but that's not the only part that matters to us. We want to know how they're connecting with the text. How are they connecting the text with their prior knowledge and experiences? And we see this as a practice. We see both as a practice, but this is, I want you to think about how often you were encouraged by classroom teachers to engage in talking about the text and connecting with their experiences. It's becoming more prevalent, but I will say this was non-existent when I was in school. My prior knowledge and understanding or my experiences didn't seem to matter. Although I was reading Dick and Jane books, so how would I connect my prior knowledge to any of that? But anyway, I digress. So, we have the shore walker, and the shore walkers are those who view texts as authoritative sources. And honestly, this is not about what the young co-learner is able to do as much as what were they able to practice. Have they had a chance to break the surface of text? Surface breakers tend to connect the textual knowledge with their prior experiences. And those who have had a chance to do that are more readily able to demonstrate that. But the progression starts with the shore walker, then the surface skimmer, where a young co-learner might share some knowledge or some perspective or opinions about the text, a surface breaker that I mentioned, and then the deep divers. Those are the ones who can think about the content and think, I don't think that's fair. So we had a text, How Others Are Feeling, and it was focused on empathy. And we had embedded a study that involved mice getting different kinds of shots and how they showed empathy with, involving pain. Well, a few of the students didn't find that text to be very fair, and we agreed. So we actually changed that text. So our young co-learners inspired us to think about scientific studies that might be less harmful to other creatures. But it was those deep divers that actually informed the kind of text that we created. That is it in terms of the slides that I have. Yeah, so let's try it out. Summer, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. What grade will you assume as a young co-learner?
How about third grade?
Sure. Okay, think about just using your teacher lens, think about how you would work through the word list task. So I have so what I have right now is a form, and I just wanted to show everyone there's a list of words by grade level. And then I'm going to mark whether she identified it automatically or did she take a little bit of time to identify it. And this I really don't use for any other reason than to just know what text to select for my young co-learner so that we have a good reading experience together. That's all that this word list is. I would never want my young co-learner to be, struggling through words to pronounce, because that's using too much of the working memory, and there's not enough space for them to actually make sense of the text. So it needs to be within their working level. That's why we have this text. And unlike other assessments, this assessment does a comprehension check on a couple of those words because, as I showed you with the simple view of reading, it's more than just reading aloud those words. You have to have a sense of what they mean. So you could be reading aloud, and this is really typical of well, my when I was teaching in Seattle, my Samoan students, they could read Hemingway. Seriously, flawless. They're not sure what they were reading. And so I want not just Summer to um, you know, find the text that would um, be somewhat enjoyable and interesting, but I really want to know what she thinks. I really want to know what kind of sense she's making of it. So that's why we do this work. Um, so without further ado, and we've designed it because we started developing this assessment during the height of the pandemic. So administering it online was our only option at one point. So you can do this online. All right, Summer, thank you for spending some time with me. Um, I am so glad um, that we have a chance to read with each other. Now, before I get to this stage, I should let everyone know that the first thing I want to do is establish a rapport with Summer. So let's just pretend that we did that. What I would be doing is a lot of times a teacher wants me to do an assessment. I might be pulling them out or working within a corner of the room. I want them to feel as comfortable as possible. So I have a conversation with them. I get to learn something else. Like I might notice their name and, oh, they look exactly like this older student. Are they possibly related? I mean, these are the kinds of things I use in my conversations with our young co-learners that are partnering elementary school because I know them so well. Oh, do you know so and so? Oh yeah, that's my sister. So it's like a nice way of connecting, and then it's a nice inroad to establishing some kind of rapport. So let's assume that happened. And now I just want to explain to Summer that the first thing we're going to do is find the right text for us to read because there's so many things that we can read, but I want to read the best text, the text that would be best for you. So we're going to read some words. You'll get a chance to read them aloud, and then we'll get a chance to know what we should be reading to with each other. Does that sound okay, Summer? Oh,
Okay.
all right. So we'll start. You see a list of words. I want you to start top left with this word here, and you'll move down, and then you'll read all the way down until both lists are done.
Okay. Mauve, can, thing, reading, now, pan, rough, sing, that, jumping, run, tran, look, help.
Okay, so what I learned is there were some vowel teams that Summer is starting to learn, like train, it was tran, and move, and also the silent E. Move was mauve. And I believe no was now. Did you say now for no? Yeah, now. So a lot of the silent words are not there. And so I'm going to continue because she missed 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 words, and that's getting up there. And so I'm wondering if I need to go further. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask her, I'm going to move on, and at the end of every grade level list, we have 2 words. Can you read this word, Summer?
That's magic.
Nice. What do you think this word means?
It's like when you go to a show and the magician takes a rabbit out of the hat. It's magic.
Okay. Oh, very good. Could you use it in a sentence?
Yeah, I like to do magic tricks with my friends.
Okay, so in my mind, she did really well with those 2 words. So it makes me feel like I can move. We're going to try one more list, Summer, but we'll be done in a minute. So you're going to read off these words like you did before, okay?
Okay.
Great. And this is family. Sorry. So we have 2 words for each one. Can you read this word?
Family.
And what does that word mean?
Family is like, it's like the people you live with and love you and take care of you. Like I live with my brother and my sister and my mom and my dad.
Nice. A lot of times I might not ask a person to use a word in a sentence. I feel like, she would know, she would know that. But she got both of those words. So I feel really confident in moving forward. One more list at least. Okay, go ahead, Summer, and you can go ahead and read like you did before.
Okay. Club, harbor, crayon, looking, different, foot, afraid, colorful, mig, mitt, shirt, match, cloud, though, butterfly.
Okay, so there were 5 words missed again. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm like, and then the way I would say, I think I have an idea for a text that we can use. And so what I would do is I would offer her a choice from series A or series B. And this would be at the second grade level. So she's a 3rd grader reading at a 2nd grade level. That's very common. And does it mean that they're behind grade level? Well, if you care about numbers, I guess that's the case. I don't really think that way though. I just want to know where they are in their journey. What's going to foster for, because I as a scientist, I have to believe if I use a different text at the 3rd grade level, even, maybe that wouldn't be so difficult for her. So I don't see these algorithmically designed numbers to be hard and fast truths, right? What matters the most is the meaning I'm making as an assessor. What meaning can I make? And what would be helpful to teachers who just want to foster development. I'll show you the text that I would have used with Summer and the kinds of questions I would have asked her. Because I think that's fairly straightforward. So what I would have done is given her an option. And so Summer, I would have asked her, we could read a text called Many Colors, or a text, What Can We Do With Our Trash? Which of those texts seem the most interesting to you?
What can we do with our trash?
Okay. So then I would go into the text And just to give you a sense of what this looks, so, this is reading the text, and there are some previewing questions. And the previewing questions would be in the supplementary materials. So in every folder for every text, you'll see there are the student slides that you show, and then the assessment form itself. And so the first thing I would do is ask her some previewing questions. What do you think happens to our trash? Where do you think it goes? What things do you use every day that are made of plastic? So plastic was apparently a word that is expected to be learned at the second grade level. Not everyone might know it, but since plastic's all around us, what we've learned is that young co-learners know that word very well. They may not recognize it in print, but they certainly know it. And all of these are spoken. And I would write down these notes so that I can sort of keep all this prior knowledge in mind so that I can see what new knowledge she has gained from the text itself. So that's one of the things that I would do. And then in this text, she would read aloud the text, and as I'm moving through, she would read the words, and then occasionally what we recommend, and this is in the guidelines, we would first of all, what I would say to Summer, let's say Summer is a multilingual learner. Before we start reading, I would say, you can use all the languages you know. And, you don't have to only use English. Reading involves all the languages and all of our knowledge. So you can use that all. And please share your thoughts as you're reading. And some young co-learners do. They'll stop and go, wow, that's a lot of plastic. And we don't shy away from those commentaries. We encourage assessors to follow up. Tell me more. What do you notice? What do you see? Do you notice this at the beach? Yeah, I saw some plastic, because that's where the beauty is. They're making connections with their prior experiences. That's what we want to do. That's what we always do when we're reading. We're constantly connecting with our prior knowledge. And so, these questions, they're genuine questions that are supposed to foster discussions during the assessment session. And so this really does kind of diverge from traditional assessments where you just stick to the text and ask questions. We want it to be dialogic, because through that dialogic nature, the young co-learner is engaged and they're thinking. They're thinking and they're sense making, and that's what we want to see. And so you can see the words and the pictures that go along with it. And, the different kinds of options in this case for using plastics. So, this is relevant to our times. And so part of this, part of the work that I do is to foster 21st century literacies in a way that hopefully raises critical consumers of information, and also to be activists in their own respective communities. And then here is a little video about making bricks from plastic. And so we would read that more thoroughly, or listen to it, watch it more thoroughly, and I would ask the Summer, what do you think about this video? And so that's how the actual session is, how the session is facilitated. But in addition to that, we have follow-up questions. And those follow-up questions, this allows you to, during reading, you can track the miscues, the prosody, the automaticity. So while she was reading, I would write down and maybe add notes for any commentary that Summer would have made. And here is a sheet for those of you needing, more concrete information, where they are in their metacognitive reasoning. But here are the questions after reading. You have explicit direct recall questions, you got implicit inference making questions, and then we have metacognitive questions, what they liked or disliked, what they found most interesting, author agenda, and any advice. And we kept it general like this because at one point we had it where, was there something that you found unfair? And that was so different from a young co-learner's experience in school. It just wasn't useful. We kept hearing no. So the more broad those questions are, the more the young co-learner can come at it in different angles. So it just allowed for more metacognitive reasoning. I found it to be incredibly useful. Teachers have now depended on this in our local environment. One young co-learner was given a phonics program to help with her, quote, dyslexia, and that's a whole other topic, and I'd be happy to talk about it. But it's a big umbrella term that means all kinds of things, and and what was it? I forget which decoding program they use here. Orton Gillingham wasn't working, and they were so surprised. I'm like, oh, I'm not surprised. And so we found out, well, it's not about phonics. This young co-learner didn't have a problem with phonics related information. They needed to strengthen their phonemic awareness, the sounds that a language produces. And so through that, I was able to identify certain activities, and they moved her to a different program, and now she's thriving. So having an actual assessment that informs a child's reading trajectory and their journey and what would help strengthen them, I feel good about this assessment. I think that as time moves on, I actually welcome UC Links folks to think about ways that it could be expanded to include high school texts. I even have an example of a high school text that might be good. The problem is developing these texts. It's really involved, and there's different things that you have to think about, and piloting is important. And so, but I welcome that adapting text is in another book that I'm about to publish called Community-Based Literacies, Theories, Methods, and Practices. So that's also will be available, and John and Mara, I'll share that book when it's ready, the e-version of that book. But anyways, that's a little flavor, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Mara and John, for the opportunity to share this. It was a labor of love.